do we want to get into our next rankings?
Yeah, let's
Next
do it.
position. Next positional rankings. Yeah, the we are doing center field this week. If you're interested in our top 10 first baseman list, check out Above Replacement Radio episode 338. We have that up. Rank them. That was our first of the 2025 run. And yeah, we were doing center field this week. And yeah, disclaimer beforehand, Jarren Duran is not going to be involved because he's a projected left fielder, at least on Fangraphs. And I think just based on how the Red Sox infield lines up, Ceddanne Rafael is going to move to center. And Duran's going to get one of the corner spots alongside Abreu. So yeah, he's not going to be involved. Aaron Judge was each of our number one center fielders last year. He's probably going to go to a corner outfield spot, probably right field as he has been most of his career. So Aaron Judge is not going to be involved in this list either. And yeah, I think those are all the guys that got some significant center field time last year that won't be involved in this list. And then yeah, these are lists going into 2025, what we believe they will do in 2025, and what we kind of expect out of them. It's not necessarily based on what they have done, but more about what we think they will do. But yeah, without further ado, who is your number 10 center fielder for 2025?
Yeah, like we talked off there beforehand, but last week with the first base list, it was very similar to what we put together last year in terms of just the names on the list with some shakeup in the order. There was a lot of shakeup here in center field. Obviously, like I mentioned, like Chris mentioned, Judge is no longer on these lists because he is in right field. He would be our number one center fielders if he was on this list, but uh, he is not. And I have five returners to my list. Chris has four. Number 10 is one of those newcomers and someone that I am quite surprised to be putting on this list. I'm talking about JJ Bleday from the Athletics, the Sacramento Athletics, as of right now. But he had a very strong season last year, slashing 243, 324, 437 with a 761 OPS. Obviously, above league average hitter. The defense was, he did struggle a little bit out there in center, but regardless, he put it together a very strong season. I really like that I really like his offensive profile. He was a high sweet spot rate guy. He had a high walk rate and a low strikeout rate, which is, I think, kind of rare to see both. In fact, JJ Bleday was one of just 10 qualifying hitters last year with a K rate below 20%, a walk rate above 10%, and a sweet spot rate above 35%. The other nine to do that were Freddie Freeman, Justin Turner, Jonathan India, Mookie Betts, Isaac Paredes, Nolan Shonowell, Yordan Alvarez, Juan Soto, and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So those are obviously some very strong names on the list, and Bleday is right there with them. So for that, I decided he was going to make my top 10 this year. I don't even know if I had him making my top 10 going into the production of this list, but I thought I'd at least put him down for consideration. And I was pretty happy with what I saw. He had a 34.8% ground ball rate last year and a 31.3% fly ball rate. I think that could play very nicely in Suter Health Park next year, at least compared to the Oakland Coliseum. I'm very optimistic to see what the offensive impact is on that field. I anticipate that it will be maybe a little more offense heavy than the Oakland Coliseum was. And for that reason, I am putting JJ Bleday on my list. He is my number 10 center fielder.
Yeah. He certainly showed some promise last year. I think got like 3 wins above replacement or something like
He
that.
did.
So yeah, JJ Bleday, number 10 for Daniel's list. My number 10 is one of my newcomers. And also I'm noticing that a lot of my players are in their early or mid 20s. And I guess that's kind of natural that as outfielders get older, maybe they do move into the corner spots, but this is a younger guy, not a lot of experience in the league, but showed some promise at the tail end of last year. And we were talking about the Tigers this in our most recent segment. I'm talking about Parker Meadows of the Detroit Tigers. Parker Meadows, he was not on my list last year, as I mentioned, but yeah, he's heading into his age 25 season. And in the final 2 months of last year, he was really, really good on both sides of the base, on both sides of the baseball. Um, in his final 47 games of the year, which was right after he came off the IL, he had the 13th highest FWAR among all position players. So he was a top 15 player in baseball for the final 2 months of the year. That was when he had an 840 OPS, and he was, putting up very good defense and base running numbers. Overall, throughout the year, he had +7 total outs above average, and that was only in 82 games. So in a full season, he would have had, double digit outs above average. And then also on the bases, he had a 62% extra base taken rate. And I feel like that can be somewhat consistent because he had a 93rd percentile sprint speed. So he's very athletic, very defensively valuable, and in the final 2 months of last year showed that he can be very offensively valuable as well. And I'm sure with that sprint speed and being a left-handed hitter, he can outperform some of those expected numbers uh, he um, because he can get some infield hits, leg out some singles that a lot of other players in the league could not leg out. So I expect him to outperform some expected numbers, put up really, really good defense, and just have a general productive year in what would be his first full year in the big leagues. So Parker Meadows getting my number 10 spot. Who is your number 9?
My number nine is another first timer on this list, a guy that I am very excited to be putting on this list. I think it's very cool that he had a breakout last year. I think we all knew what the strengths were going into 2024. I also think we definitely knew what the weaknesses were, and he improved on a lot of that while keeping it the strengths. I'm talking about Brenton Doyle from the Colorado Rockies, who put together, like I said, a relatively similar season on service to JJ Bleday, 260, 317, 446 for 763 OPS. OPS plus, I would imagine, is a little bit down based on cores, but he had quite the impressive second half. I mean, he had a July last year that I suspect a lot of like baseball nerds like you and I will be talking about for quite a while, like a May of 2013 Dom Brown type of month where he slashed 333, 394, 800 for an 1194 OPS and 99 plate appearances throughout the month of July. I mean, what? Brendan Doyle. No, I mean, he is one of the best defensive players in the game. We knew that last year. He continued that this year with 98th percentile outs above average in center field. He obviously has a lot of outfield to play out there in cores. It's one of the larger outfields in all of baseball, and he did it. He for 2 straight years now has done it basically better than anyone else really could. So that's awesome. The base running is also very strong. He has 94th percentile sprint speed. And the offense, it came with it, right? He's the kind of guy where you don't need him to be this superstar. We don't need him to be the 1194 OPS hitter that he was in July. We just need him to be 763. That's perfect. And that's exactly what he did last year. One thing that really stuck out to me when I'm doing these lists, one thing that I really like looking at, maybe as like a tiebreaker, is how they did on four-seam fastballs, because that's the pitch you're going to see the most of unless you really struggle against off speed. And Brenton Doyle, he had a -12 run value on four-seam fastballs from April through June last year, and a 0 run value from July through September. His whiff rate on four-seamers went from 32.5% in April through June to 21.6% in July through September. So he got so much better on four seamers. And I know 0, run value is nothing to like freak out about, but when the precedent was -12, that is quite excellent. So I really liked the improvements that he showed on four seamers, and obviously everything else kind of went with it. So yeah, Brenton Doyle is cracking my list this year at my number 9 spot.
Right, right. Yeah, my number 9 is someone who was on my list last year. He's going down quite a bit. It is Luis Robert, who was my number 4 center fielder last year. He is heading into his age 27 season, but last year just kind of, on all fronts was a disaster. He got hurt early in the year, but came back. He still managed to get, I think, over 100 games on the field, maybe even around 120. But so it's not a small sample size of what happened. His OPS plus went from 130 in 2023 to 87. His expected WOBA went from the 76th percentile in 2023 to the 6th percentile in 2024. And then he went from a plus 12 defensive run value to a neutral, uh, 0 defensive run value. So yeah, like he had a really, really bad year last year. So I'm still kind of figuring out what to think of him. I'm not completely writing off last year, but I'm not saying that that is who he is, because if I thought that was who he is, he would not make this list. So yeah, he's 2 years removed from a very good season, and he's also, as I mentioned, he's only heading into his age 27 season, so it's not like, oh, the decline is arriving for Luis Robert. This very easily could have been an outlier this past year. And I could easily see him return to MVP vote getting form. But given the fact that he's coming off a year with a neutral defense and an 87 OPS plus, I can't consider him with the top echelon right now. So Luis Robert getting my number 9 spot. Who's your number 8?
For my number 8, I am staying in Chicago, but going north for a guy that I'm very high on this year for various reasons. I'm talking about Pete Crow Armstrong from the Chicago Cubs. This is a guy that I would love to see in my like top 5 on this list next year, maybe even like top 3. I don't know how likely it is. That's why I have him at number 8, because there's obviously definitely a lot of flaws that we saw last year, but also so much potential. Chris, I don't know if you know this. He went to Harvard Westlake High School. Have you heard of this place, Chris?
Yeah, no, I have an idea of it for sure.
Yeah, they're great with position players. That's what they're, I mean, that's why Pete Armstrong came out of there. So, yeah, he's going into his age 22 season next year, or excuse me, his age 23 season next year. I assume the Cubs are probably anticipating he's going to be their everyday center fielder, given that they traded Cody Bellinger. I think the big message there was we're putting PCA out there every day. And like Brenton Doyle, this is not a guy that needs to be a fantastic hitter to be very valuable and to be worthy of being on this top 10 list. In fact, he had a 670 OPS last year, an 87 weighted runs created plus in only 123 games, and still nearly put up 3 wins. I mean, that's how good his defense is. That's how good his base running numbers were last year. So obviously there is so much talent in the offense. We kind of saw it for a little hint there in the month of August. That was the month where he hit a lot better than usual. The line drive rate is really what we're counting on. I mean, because this is a guy that doesn't have a lot of power. Wrigley is obviously not very friendly for a lot of contact hitters going for power. He had a 26% line drive rate in the month of August, and that was his best month last year. If he can stay around, I don't know, like the 25% threshold for a line drive rate, if he could just be around the average or above it, I think we have a really good hitter on our hands here. He only had a 21.8% line drive rate last year. To be honest, he could even maybe use more ground balls. He was below the league average last year, but when you have 99th percentile sprint speed and not a lot of power, sometimes ground balls are actually more. Obviously, there's things that he needs to work on, particularly the patience. Right, he had 11th percentile walk rate. He had 2nd percentile chase rate over 40%. One stat that stuck out to me: Pico Armstrong swung at the first pitch on 48% of his plate appearances where he didn't bunt. I'm taking out bunts because that's a little cheap. 48.6% first pitch swing rate, which is around double the major league average. It's right below Corey Seager. It's right below guys like Ezekiel Tovar. And on those first pitch swings, he had a 32.3% whiff rate and negative 3.7 run value per 100. So he wasn't particularly good on them. If he can either be a little more patient or just, be a little more, better selective with which first pitches he's swinging at or just which pitches he's swinging at in general, really, that's definitely a key step forward for him to take to continue to rise on this list. But as of right now, I have him at number 8. I would love to see this one come to fruition or even exceed it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's certainly a big part of the youth movement at that position. Um, my number um my number 8 is someone who is still very young, but it seems like he's been in the league. He has been in the league longer than some of these guys we're talking about. But he's still very young. I'm talking about Michael Harris II. I had him as my number 3 center fielder last year. I was very optimistic about him considering his final, I believe, 4 months of the season in 2023. But unfortunately, it backfired a little bit. He did not have the greatest season. He was at about 2 wins above replacement last year. A fairly average player in general, maybe a little bit above average considering his defense. But yeah, just I'm not a big fan of the consistent offensive regression since his rookie year. His OPS plus has gone from 130 to 116 to 99 over these past 3 years. But it's not all bad. Some of the underlying stuff is still very good. All of his expected numbers last year were still 80th percentile or higher. So that is a sign that, his quality of contact, strikeout rate, walk rate, that combination of everything is still pretty good. And also there was some lack of luck that he had. He had the second unluckiest difference out of 142 in WOBA and expected WOBA on barrels. And with that, a lot of the time it can be based on the location of where he's hitting those barrels. He was top 60% of those 142 on barrels. So he was kind of middle of the pack on pull rate on barrels, but he had the second unluckiest difference in WOBA and expected WOBA on barrels. So I expect some of that to be corrected, and I expect him to be an above average hitter this upcoming year. And then along with that, he was at +8 defensive run value, which is also really, really good. I guess what helped also drag him down the list was his base running value has kind of gone down. His sprint speed has consistently been going down over the past 2 years, and also that BSR has been going down. It was actually negative last year. He was getting caught stealing a lot more than he was the previous 2 years. And I think that extra base taken rate was also going down a little bit. So maybe that's an outlier, but with how the general value on the basis has gone down, I had to consider that, and that's part of what maybe dragged him down the list a little bit, along to pair with the drop in hitting production. But yeah, Michael Harris is at my number 8. Who is at your number 7?
At number 7, I have my first returner to the list for today. A guy who was number 6 last year for me that is moving down a spot, but relatively staying the same. I'm talking about Cody Bellinger, now of the New York Yankees. We talked about him last week on the show after the trade. Obviously last year was very predictable, unpredictable, in many different ways. A lot of the underlying metrics stayed the same, and the actual on the surface statistics went with it, which is what didn't happen in 2023, and that prompted the whole kind of standoff free agency that Cody Bellinger had there. But regardless, I do think that he will be more successful in Yankee Stadium. Most notably, the fact that he pulled 36.4% of his fly balls last year, which of anyone that I considered on the list, he actually had the highest percent of fly balls pulled. I think that will certainly play a lot more in Yankee Stadium than it would have in Wrigley Field. That should probably go without saying, but yeah, I do anticipate a much improved season from Cody Bellinger this year. Will it be the 881 that he put 881 OPS that he put up in 2023? I don't know, but I think it could be closer to that than the 751 that he put up in 2024. On top of that, he plays, I think the defensive numbers are a little skewed because he spent a lot of time at first base last year, and I really don't think that he's going to be doing that in 2024. Other than that, I think the defense is very good. The base running is also very strong as well. I think he adds a little bit of Yankee fans love to talk about like diversity in the lineup, right? Like you need less powerful guys to complement Aaron Judge, and I think Cody Bellinger is sort of a mix of both to a certain degree, right? I mean, I think we can expect maybe 25 homers next year, while also maintaining a low strikeout rate, maybe a higher batting average, not necessarily Judge high, but 270, 275. Things like that. And so yeah, I put Cody Bellinger in my 7 this year.
Yeah, you put a former Cub at number 7. I put a current Cub at number 7. It's your number 8.
Yeah.
It is Pete Crow Armstrong. He's another new addition to this list. He was not on my list last year. And yeah, as you mentioned, heading into his age 23 season. So yeah, I think that's part of, and also a theme of maybe what I've changed in my evaluation is valuing youth a little bit more, and the fact that he's heading into his age 23 season has already shown some glimpses of really quality play. Makes me really optimistic about his potential for 2025. Yeah, heading into his age 23 season. Last year, despite him not necessarily having a complete full year, at least in terms of games played or plate appearances, he led all center fielders in fielding run value in 2024. So, in according to the analytics, he was of all these players, he's the best at defense. So that is something I value a good bit, especially in an important defensive position like center field, where it's valued quite a bit. It's certainly valued the most among all the outfield positions. And to pair that, he was also tremendous on the bases. He went 27 for 30 on stolen bases. Not only did he steal 27 bags in a limited amount of opportunities, he only got caught 3 times. And then yeah, he also finished out the season really, really strong, which is something that I value a lot out of someone that is, still learning, still getting used to the Major League Baseball game. He hit 289 with an 816 OPS and 126 weighted runs created plus in his final 51 games. Yeah, if this was a guy heading into his age 34 season, I'd just think, oh, he got hot, and it's not necessarily something he'll carry into the next season. But since he's heading into his age 23 season, I believe that that's a sign of some development at the major league level, and something I'm optimistic about. And as you mentioned, if he can be, he doesn't even have to be a 126 weighted runs created plus guy to be valuable. He can be an average bat, and with that defense and base running value, um, he has the potential to be really, really good and make number 7 or number 8 be like an undervalue potentially. So, but still, we haven't seen too much out of him quite yet. We still have to sort of see it to believe it. So, staying a little bit, not getting too ahead of ourselves here, but still, he's certainly good enough to make this list. Who do you have at your number 6 slot?
Yeah, so in my number 6, I have someone who is new to the center field position. Also new to, I think, any of our lists. I don't know if we had him last year in a different position. Talking about ONeal Cruz from the Pittsburgh Pirates, as my earbuds are getting taken from me. ONeal Cruz is obviously starting his first full season in center field. I don't necessarily agree with the move, but it's happening. So, I'm judging it as he's going to be playing center field full time next year. We'll see how long that lasts. But, he had a very slow April and a very slow September. But other than that, he had a really, really good year. His final slash line was 259, 324, 449 for a 773 OPS. And I think he's capable of so much more. If there was one player that I could just handpick to have like a breakout season and reach like the 80 to 90th percentile of what their ceiling is, it would probably be ONeal Cruz. I think in terms of the more controllable metrics, he has the potential to be like a top 5, top 10 most fun player to watch in baseball. Right, the bat speed is second highest, second fastest behind only Giancarlo Stanton. The exit velocity, he's averaging a hard hit ball on his batted balls. Obviously, the strikeout rate is not exactly where you want it to be, and it probably isn't going to get there. I mean, he's been sitting around a 30% strikeout rate for 2 full seasons now, and we just haven't seen it go down below 30%. So I'm kind of assuming that that's kind of just who he's going to be. If it can get down to 25%, that's great, but I'm not gonna get my hopes up on that front too much. But regardless, there's still so much potential here with the batted ball metrics. He's another guy that could use a little more pull in the ball, right? He only pulled I don't know, I don't have the number off the top of my head of percent of fly balls pulled, but it definitely could be higher. But also the amount of fly balls could be higher in general as well. Only a 20.6% fly ball rate last year, a 48.1% ground ball rate. And granted, he is very fast, but he has too much power to be hitting the ball on the ground half the time, no matter how fast he is. I do feel optimistic that these changes can happen. And I think number 6 is an appropriate ranking given the potential here. One thing to note, obviously, the center field thing it'll be his first full season. But he did play a little bit of it last year for the last like month plus of the season. He did struggle at the plate after moving to center field because of rising ground ball rates, but he did have 2 outs above average in center field. However, he did also have -3 defensive runs saved. So the two metrics didn't quite agree on him, but there is hope that he can be, a productive center fielder for the Pirates next year.
Certainly, yeah, certainly. Yeah, my number 6, as yeah, we're starting to overlap more. 8 through 10, we did not overlap at all, but finally we're getting some more overlap. I have Brenton Doyle at my number 6. He yeah, he is coming off a very pleasantly surprising year. Not on the defensive side, but offensive side, as you mentioned. And it was just such a major improvement. And yeah, I should mention he is heading into his age 27 season, so there's reason to believe that he has potential to get better here. And in 2024, he had the third most FWAR among the current crop of center fielders. So he was, just in terms of overall value, he was really, really good. He and yeah, in terms of what improved him last year, he had a dramatic decrease in strikeout rate, a dramatic increase in sweet spot rate, improvements in barrel rate, and average exit velocity, and that all bumped his OPS plus from 53 to 104 from 2023 to 2024. And then to pair that with his defense, he also won his second Gold Glove in a row. After putting up positive 15 defensive run value. And he also had the most BSR among current center fielders in 2024. And that's largely because he went 30 for 35 on stolen bases. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that OPS plus goes down a little bit because of how dramatic that increase in production was. And also considering that a lot of that production did happen in 1 month. So yeah, I don't necessarily expect him to be an above average bat, but he is one of the best, he's arguably the best the best defensive center fielder on here. And he's also arguably the best on the bases of this group. So that has its value in its own right. And there's not really um, a whole lot of players on this, in this center field position that really dominated at the plate, especially among the current center fielders. So having a guy that may have below average offense isn't necessarily that much of a worry for me, considering that there aren't a lot of dominant hitters on this list. A lot of them do just kind of excel in the defense and base running department. So yeah, that's Brenton Doyle. Who is your number 5?
Yeah, my number 5 is the guy that you mentioned earlier. I'm talking about Michael Harris II. He was actually my number 5 last year as well, so no change for him on this list for me. And the reason why I put him so high is because I offers something to a stronger degree that no one else that I've mentioned before offers, and that's just reliability, right? I mean, a lot of my previous picks are guys that showed signs or flashes of breakouts last year, but could easily regress back to being maybe off the list at very worst. I think Michael Harris has the highest likelihood of return to the list out of everyone that I've mentioned so far, which is why I have him in my number 5 spot, along with just, several other things. It was a down year for him offensively, but he did battle injury like most people on the Braves. But, I think the signs of potential are still there. The bat speed, like I mentioned, is very high. The exit velocity and hard hit numbers are very good. Certainly the defense is still there as well. 93 OAA, despite missing some games in center last year. So I mean, I think the defense was perhaps even stronger than outside above average can even really make it out to be. Other than that, the batted ball metrics could use some improvement. The 49% ground ball rate could be dropped a few percent and given to fly ball and line drive rate. I think he does have the power to be a 20 to 25 home run guy a year if he can lift the ball just enough. The pull rate did, however, go up last year, which I was very happy about. In 2022, he had a pull rate of 32.1%. In 2023, it was 33.3%. And in 2024, it jumped to 40.7%. So he's pulling the ball a lot more. At least that's what he did last year. I do feel optimistic that, if he can continue that this year and improve some of the other things, a lot of good results will follow. We can get him back up to that 800 OPS guy that he was the first 2 years of his career while maintaining strong defense and center. Maybe the base running can get back to where it was in the past as well. So I think there's still a lot of untapped stuff here with Michael Harris II, and he is remaining in my top 5 for the center field list.
Right, right. Yeah. And yeah, last thing I'll say on him is he really finished the year
Yes.
out really strong. He hit 367 with an 1103 OPS in his final 18 games. Help put the Braves in a playoff spot. So yeah, on to my top 5. And my number 5 is your number 6 center fielder. It is ONeal Cruz. As he was obviously not on my list last year because he was a shortstop, and he wasn't on my shortstop list either. But yeah, I feel like we had been waiting on the full year, the full culmination of ONeal Cruz, and it wasn't anything crazy last year, but it was still pretty good and very productive. And also he remains very young. He's heading into his age 26 season. And we mentioned it is a new position for him. And I am pretty optimistic about what he can bring to the table in center field. He put up, as you mentioned, he put up +2 outs above average in only 23 games in center field. And obviously rates will change and stuff like that, and things will be adjusted. But you put that over a full season, he's, going to put up double-digit outs above average if he keeps that up. So that's a really good sign. And he also has amazing arm strength. And as long as he doesn't overthrow everybody, I think he can bring some very good arm value to the table as well, from center field, possibly even more than he did at shortstop. But uh, but yeah, and on the offensive side of things, put up a 113 OPS plus last year. And he also went 22 for 23 on stolen bases. So, that speed is really starting to show its value. He's learning to run the bases very well, and did it very well last year. He had 3.5 F4 last year, which would have ranked 5th among the current center fielders in F4 in 2024. And also in expected categories, he was 75th percentile or higher on all of them. And he was also 97th percentile or higher in average exit velocity, hard hit rate, and barrel rate. And that's always just a good sign to have that base of things. If he can, we're always more likely to see dramatic fluctuation on strikeout rate more than average exit velocity. Your average exit velocity is usually what it is, and kind of stays around there. He can more easily fix the strikeout rate issue than the average exit velocity. And even still, considering that he probably will have a good amount of strikeouts, I still think he's going to be a very productive player this upcoming year. So yeah, and not to mention age 26 season. So he still has time to develop. Who is your number 4?
At number 4, I'm falling back into an old trap, which I'm sure you are as well, because you haven't mentioned him. But I'm talking about Byron Buxton.
Mm.
At this point, I think you kind of have to accept you're probably not getting more than 400 plate appearances out of him. The last time he had more than 400 plate appearances in a season was 2017. Uh, and hey, 2020, it wasn't his fault, but unfortunately, every other year he just hasn't been able to stay on the field. But I mean, he put up a 142 weighted runs created plus last year, and also had the lowest strikeout rate for him since 2021. So that was pretty awesome. I just can't ignore what is here, because it's not just the on the surface numbers. Every underlying metric kind of backs up what we're seeing, right? The actual WOBA was 353 last year. It was a little bit lower than his actual WOBA of 366. The hard hit rate was where it usually is at 48%. The average exit velocity was close to 92 miles an hour. The sweet spot rate was almost 40%. The bat speed was nearly averaging a fast swing. The defense was still there. The base running is still there. The health unfortunately has never been there, and it still isn't. But additionally, he's also pulling the ball continuingly to do so. His pull rate has been above 45% every year since 2020. Every year in the 2020s, Byron Buxton has put up a pull rate above 45%. It follows on ground balls too. I think last year it was around 35%. And there are some things that went down. The walk rate was nearly cut in half from 2023. I didn't care for that. But regardless, there's still just so much here. Even if you're not going to get it in a full season, a 142 weighted runs created plus is not something you can really just put down and ignore, even if it's not in a full season. Byron Buxton's going into his age 31 season next year. I'm really hoping we can start to see more consistency, although you really just can't rely on it. But regardless, I'm still putting him in my 4 spot.
Yeah. And yeah, something I'll say before I reveal my number 4 is it was weird putting this list together because it doesn't seem like anyone at the position has much of a consistent track record in both health and performance.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of these players are
Really,
just
none of
maybe,
them makes, yeah.
like a lot of these players we're talking about maybe just had their first good year in the majors or first glimpses of potential greatness. Um, like there's not a lot of guys. Whereas last year, or excuse me, last week, when we talked about the first baseman, like Christian Walker, very consistent. Freddie Freeman, very consistent. Maybe had a little bit of a down year, but still was very productive. Bryce
Medelson,
Harper,
yeah.
like Bryce Harper, very consistent. There's really no one like that at the center field position right now. So, outside of maybe one guy, but even then it's arguable. So yeah, now my number 4, we're overlapping here is Byron Buxton.
I
Um,
figured.
and yeah, like the reason why I mentioned that is because yeah, on a normal list, I probably have him more down the list because yeah, as you mentioned, we haven't seen him hit 400 plate appearances in 7 years. So it's been a long time since we've seen him have a full season, but we don't really know what we're getting out of a lot of these players on this list. So and even with him not having much playing time last year, he was still one of the best center fielders in baseball. Despite him only playing 102 games, he ranked 4th among the current center fielders in FWAR in 2024. That is because he put up a 137 OPS plus and +4 defensive run value at the center field position. And yeah, along with the 137 OPS plus, his underlying stuff was there. 85th percentile or higher in average exit velocity, barrel rate, hard hit rate, sweet spot rate, expected WOBA, and expected slugging. So yes, he is. We're not going to see him. More than likely not going to see him hit 140 games this year. But in the games that he is going to play, he's probably going to be really, really good, and he's probably going to produce quite a bit. So that has its own value. Sure, you'd love to see him play more, um, but there are worse options to have go out there for 102 games. Yeah, so yeah, Byron Buxton, my number 4. Who do you have at number 3?
Yeah, I'm like that. Number 3, this is where I put Mike Trout. He was my number 2 last year. Byron Buxton, by the way, was my number 8 last year. I forgot to mention that. Um, yeah, I mean, hey, this is such a weird because he has a number 1 ceiling still. I would argue. The only thing is that ceiling is a full season, and we just haven't seen it since basically 2019. You could kind of argue 2022. I mean, it wasn't a full season. It was 119 games, but it was the closest, overwhelmingly the closest we've seen him get to a full season in the 2020s. It was still a 139 weighted runs created plus for him last year, which is actually quite terrible by Mike Trout standards. Great by regular standards, but Mike Trout has a 169 career weighted runs created plus, even with the last 2 seasons being a little less than ideal. In 2024, he had the fewest number of plate appearances he's had in any season throughout his career at 126. So it is kind of hard to read into what the actual performance was, but regardless, he did have his lowest strikeout rate since 2019. The walk rate remained very good, and a lot of the underlying metrics were very strong as usual. A 17.1% barrel rate, a 40% sweet spot rate, a 405 expected weighted on base average. There is still a lot of very good stuff here. It's just a matter of will we see it or not. Like much like Byron Buxton, can't really rely on a full season because we simply haven't seen it since you and I were freshmen in college, and now we're going into year 2 and 3 respectively of our full time jobs. So, um, you can't rely on it, but you still just can't ignore what he actually has done when he's been on the field. I can't put him at number one because of the health complications, but I can't put him below number three given the other players on this list because of what we have seen from him. So Mike Trout is remaining in my top three on this list. He is my number three.
Yeah, my number three is also Mike Trout. So we have the same
Mm-hmm.
4 and 3. And yeah, I put him at number 5 last year. So it is funny to kind of see him go up this list just based on the circumstances. I had yeah, last year I had Judge, J-Rod, Harris, and Robert ahead of him. Judge is no longer playing center field, and then Harris and Robert um moved down this list because of just how they played. Yeah, Trout did well when he played last year, but he only played 29 games. And granted, yeah, I expect him to I expect him to play more than 29 this year. How many he'll play, that's certainly a question mark. But yeah, as you mentioned, that on the field stuff, it's still there. He still has it when he's on the field. He's still also like a tremendous athlete. He was 90th percentile in sprint speed last year. He started stealing bases again. He had the most stolen base attempts that he had since 2019, and that was in only 29 games that he had last year. So like there's still the potential to be a very good all-around player. He's never been a defensive liability, at least according to StatCast. And he he put up an xWOBA over 400. That's an elite level. Um if he qualified for percentiles, that would be like 95th percentile or even higher. So like that's still there. And when he's on the field, he's going to be a very good player. It's just a matter of if he will be on the field. Same thing as I said last year. And that was unfortunately proven to a great extent last year. I expected him to play a little bit more than that, but yeah, you just you're hoping for the best. Even considering that he's been a star or he was a star more than a decade ago. He's still only heading into his age 33 season. So he's still like it's still there. It's still there. It's just the fact that he has not played. And that's kind of the frustrating thing is it's not like, oh, he's playing, but who cares? It's like or oh, he's not playing, but who cares? It's like he's not playing, and if he was playing, he'd be doing wonderful. So yeah, that's Mike Trout is my number three. Who is your number two center
Yeah.
fielder?
I mean, Mike Trout to me is still appointment television.
Certainly, yeah.
Like when he's on, I'm watching. I will be there. You can find me watching the Angels games. Uh, when Mike Trout is on the field. It's just we need to see it more. At number two, I'm obviously picking another returner to the or not another returner, but a first timer on the list, a guy who finished runner up for the Rookie of the Year award last year and put together an outstanding rookie campaign for the San Diego Padres. I'm talking about Jackson Merill. He is going into amazingly his age 22 season. Uh, Last year, obviously, a stellar performance, an 826 OPS in nearly 600 plate appearances. So many things that he did well. He was hitting the ball hard. He was putting it in the sweet spot, not striking out a lot. The walk rate could have been a little bit better, but it was his rookie season. I'll cut him some slack. Um, Regardless, this is a pretty clear number two for me. One thing that I talked about with Jackson Merrill pretty early last season, I said this as a joke, but I really did mean it. Before he was, a clear rookie of the year candidate, I was said, I feel like I've never watched Jackson Merrill pull a ball. I feel like I've only seen him hit it to dead center or to the opposite field. And my eyes were really not deceiving me from, hang on, let me pull up the actual numbers here. From March through, through June last year, from 328 to 630, he had a 29.4% pull rate. And that number went up to 34%, 34.2% in the final 3 months of the season. Additionally, when he was hitting fly balls, he had an 18.3% pull rate on fly balls from March to June, and that number went up to 24.4% from July to September. So still not league average quite yet, but obviously it's an improvement. And I think that's, in large part some of the reason why he became a clear rookie of the year candidate late in the season there. There's obviously plenty of other things as well. The defense for a guy that came up as a shortstop was outstanding in center field. He was hitting the ball hard. Like I mentioned, he was hitting it for contact very well. He looked pretty close to a five-tool player last year. If we're being honest, I mean, there's, the arm strength is very good. The defense is very good. He stole 16 bases last year. Yeah, Jackson Merill looks like almost a very complete player. I would love the walks to go up, but that's about it. And he's my number 2 center fielder going into next year.
Right, right. Yeah. My number 2 is actually Julio Rodriguez, and
Mm.
I originally had him number 1, and then I started writing out the notes for my number 2, and I was like, I don't know, my number 2, he kind of earned his spot, and I'll get into that later, but more talking about Julio Rodriguez. This is the second year in a row I have him at number 2. I had him behind Judge last year. But yeah, kind of similar to Michael Harris in a little bit of a way. He has had kind of consistent drop off in hitting production. Um, Everything else has kind of stayed pretty good, but his hitting production has been going down, at least in terms of the actual results. But in turn, with what the positives of Julio Rodriguez is despite a little bit of a down year last year, he still leads all current center fielders in FWAR over the last 2 years. And he's also only heading into his age 24 season. He's been a prominent figure in the league ever since he came into it, but we still have to remember he's a very, very young player. And his average exit velocity, barrel rate, strikeout, and walk rates were not very far off from his rookie season. And in that rookie season, he had a 147 OPS plus. So maybe had a little bit of luck on his side that rookie year. But in terms of just the base offensive stuff, I think it's still kind of there. He hasn't had, it's not like he's hitting the ball that worse or he's striking out a lot more. It's just a matter of maybe kind of his pull rates a little bit and also maybe a little bit of a unfortunate luck on his side. But yeah, he's certainly still a very, very quality player. I could certainly see him being number 1 in my next year's list, but this year's at number 2. Yeah, now on to your number 1.
Yeah, so number 1 is where I put Julio Rodriguez. I do think he is the number 1 center fielder going into next year, and I'll get to more than in a second. I had him at number 2 last year, so he is moving up from me. And yeah, look, he did have a down year last year. He had a 734 OPS, which is not very good and not what you wanted from him. Say after he won Rookie of the Year in 2022. I spent, Chris, like a good hour trying to find what went wrong. And really there's not much in any of the underlying metrics. The only thing that I found, in comparison to his previous years was his pull rate went down. It went from 39% to 33%. But even then, there was not much that really followed from that. All of his batted ball metrics are relatively the same. His ground ball rate it went down by 3% last year. His fly ball rate went up by 2%. I looked up his pulled fly ball rate. It was the same. I looked up his opposite field and straightaway fly ball rate. They stayed the same. There was really not much change that actually took place for Julio Rodriguez under the surface. And I just couldn't understand why exactly we saw such a dip in production. The strikeout rate has been relatively the same. The walk rate's been relatively the same. There's just not much that's changed from him, but I did find this and I thought it was interesting. And this is a small sample size. I'm making this out to be like the very base of the argument, but this is more why I think he's going to return more to form. One thing that I found is that he had some terrible luck on opposite field fly balls this year. And I don't mean like his numbers on opposite field fly balls decreased. No, the exit velocity was the same. The barrel rate was the same. All of the good numbers that you want to see on these fly balls were relatively the same. He just didn't get the same results. And I looked at this. Julio Rodriguez had 14 fly balls to the opposite field that were considered blasts, which is one of the new bat tracking metrics. It takes into account if you are, if it's a fast swing and if it's what is it again? It's a fast swing and it's basically a barrel, but it's if it's a fast swing and if it's squared up is what it is. So you yeah you it was a fast swing over 75 miles per hour, and the combination of bat speed and exit velocity, or pitch speed and bat speed, produced an 80th percentile possible average exit velocity. So essentially, it means you crushed it in basic terms. Julio Rodriguez had 14 of these fly balls last year, and he was one of 21 hitters to have uh, at least 10 of these balls. The average hit distance was 335 feet. That was the lowest on this list of 21. The second lowest was Aaron Judge at 346. So an 11-foot difference in average hit distance on these fly balls. All had to do with the spin he was getting on the baseball. I looked at T-Mobile Park, and the whole venue didn't show these kinds of metrics, this kind of drop off. I think it was more unlucky than anything. And that's a lot of home runs that Julio Rodriguez missed that became just warning track fly balls. I believe if he can get back to normal on these. By the way, he hit 357 on these batted balls, the lowest on the list. He slugged 1143, also the lowest on the list. If he can get up to like the 1800 mark, that's like 5 more home runs that we're adding, that we're subtracting from fly balls as well. And that alone puts him a lot closer to where he was previously. Add in, higher pull rate. Maybe he decreases the strikeout rate, increases the walk rate a little bit. I still think we have the best center fielder in the game. So I am banking on a bounce back from Julio Rodriguez next year.
Right, right. Yeah, I certainly think he will improve this upcoming year, and yeah, I think that might be reflected in my top 50 list, which is,
Mm-hmm.
where he's going to be, top 50 list in players of baseball. But yeah, my number one is Jackson Merill, who obviously, or I guess he could have been ranked last year, but he was not ranked on my list heading into 2024. And he gets my number one spot this year. He led all current center fielders in F4 last year, and he was the seventh best player in baseball in his final 91 games of 2024. And yeah, the reason why I I guess I put him number one, and I'll preface this by saying that, usually when I talk about these players and why I rank them, I have to go kind of on a track record and talk about what they've not only done last year, but what they've done in years past. But with Jackson Merrill and Major League experience, it's only last year. And what I saw last year was really, really impressive on really all fronts. Not only was he a very good hitter and arguably the best hitter of these current center fielders. He was just a great all-around player, and just really impressive in all aspects. He was, with the hitting stuff, not only did he get very good results and have a 130, I believe it was a 130 OPS plus, he was also 94th percentile in expected WOBA. He actually underperformed his expected metrics. Also 96th percentile in expected slugging. And during that hot stretch where he was the seventh best player in baseball, his actual numbers and expected numbers were pretty in line. He didn't really luck his way into having those results. He was hitting the ball hard, had a high barrel rate, was improving his fly ball rate, improving his pull rate, as you mentioned. And it just like things looked really, really good on the underlying side. Also, on defense, he was 97th percentile in outs above average. Had 12 outs above average in his first year. Basically his first year playing center field. And then yeah, not to mention he did that as a 21-year-old. So he's heading into his age 22 season. There's obviously it's not the expectation, but there's reason to believe that he can have an even better year. So yeah, given just what he gave us last year and especially the last the last basically 2/3 of the season last year. Just there's a lot to love, and I couldn't I couldn't deny what that was, and the fact that we haven't seen him in, I can't really say that, you know, oh, we had a rough 2023 in the big leagues, like he wasn't in the big leagues. So I can't really put that against
Mm,
him or think like, oh, that's a possibility. I only have 2024 to go off of, and I really loved what he did in 2024, in terms of results and what was under the surface as well. So and yeah, given the fact that he's going to be heading into his age 22 season, I have to love what his potential is for next year. But yeah, those are our lists. I should mention
Want
a
to go through them?
couple honorable mentions, and I'll let you throw in some as well, because I did write a lot of guys down.
Yeah, so did I.
Because yeah, that like 8 through 10, even like 7 through 10 was tough to fill out and figure out what the order was. I should go into the history of my doc. I did originally have Jake Myers in this list, but pushed him out. He's a really good defensive center fielder with Houston and improved his offensive production last year. Evan Carter was in consideration because it on the Fangraphs projected the lineup, he's projected as a center fielder, and I still like, his potential and whatnot. So he was in consideration. Garrett Mitchell and also Jacob Young were in consideration, along with JJ Bleday. He was also in consideration. So
A lot of
yeah,
interesting names on this one for sure.
I had a long list of people to consider, but ultimately these were my 10. Who did you have as honorable mentions?
Yeah, Luis Robert was my number 11. Didn't anticipate I would kick him off the list, but that is what I ultimately ended up doing. Parker Meadows was another one as well. So both of the guys that I didn't have that you had were in consideration for me. You didn't have Cody Bellinger, did you?
No, I did not.
Interesting. Yeah, that's I I'm kind of blanking on who the other ones were that I was thinking of. There were others as well. But yeah,
Yeah,
should we
um
go through our lists?
right. I think the thing I probably would have had Cody Bellinger on my honorable or in my doc originally, but I think when I was putting together the list, he was still on the Cubs and was at a different
Mm,
position. So
yep.
maybe he would have been in more consideration if I wasn't making the list earlier. Um but yeah, 10 through 1. What was your 10 through 1?
Yeah, so number 10, I had JJ Bleday. Number 9, Brenton Doyle. Number 8, Pete Crow Armstrong. Number 7, Cody Bellinger. Number 6, ONeal Cruz. Number 5, Michael Harris II. Number 4, Byron Buxton. Number 3, Mike Trout. Number 2, Jackson Merrill. And number 1, Julio Rodriguez.
Yeah, my number 10 was Parker Meadows, number 9, Luis Robert, number 8, Michael Harris, uh, number 7, Pete Crow Armstrong, number 6, Brenton Doyle, number 5, ONeal Cruz, number 4, Byron Buxton, number 3, Mike Trout, number 2, Julio Rodriguez, and number 1, Jackson Merrill. Um,
We've yet to agree on the number 1, but I do feel like that will change next week.
yeah, I hope so because I haven't put the list together, but I'm pretty sure I know who my number 1 will be, and I'm a pretty big fan of the guy. So, um,
Which is Yeah, that's where I'm at as well. Haven't put it together yet, but I have a feeling I know who's going to be at the top when I'm done considering.